At the center of this tragic story were two sisters, Emma and Natalia Sullivan, whose lives had been intertwined in a complex web of love, rivalry, and resentment since childhood. Natalia, the elder of the two, had always been the golden child, beautiful, successful, and married to the charming and successful architect Daniel Harper. Their union was the envy of Branton Hills, an apparently perfect marriage that everyone aspired to emulate. Emma and Natalia were born into a family of modest means. Their father was a local fisherman and their mother a schoolteacher. From an early age, it was evident that the two sisters were as different as night and day. Natalia, with her gentle demeanor, was the pride of their parents. She excelled in school, was beloved by her teachers, and seemed to navigate Branton Hills' social circles with effortless grace. Her path in life seemed predetermined. She would go to college, find a respectable job, and marry a good man to start her own family. Emma, however, was a force of nature from the moment she could walk. She possessed a wild spirit that intrigued and unsettled those around her. Although she was just as intelligent as her sister, Emma's academic achievements were overshadowed by her rebellious nature and her tendency to break the rules. As they grew older, the differences between the sisters became more pronounced. Natalia pursued a career in education, following in her mother's footsteps, while Emma jumped from one job to another, never quite finding her place. It was during this time that Emma's manipulative tendencies began to surface. She managed to get out of trouble using her wit and charm, manipulating situations to her advantage. Emma's relationships were always intense, but short-lived. She seemed to thrive on the chaos of new romances, only to grow bored when the initial excitement faded. This pattern left behind a trail of broken hearts and resentful ex-boyfriends, further cementing her reputation as the black sheep of Branton Hills. Natalia, on the other hand, had returned to her hometown after college and quickly caught the attention of Daniel Harper, rising star in the world of architecture. Daniel had come to Branton Hills to oversee the restoration of the town's historic lighthouse, but soon found himself captivated not only by the quiet beauty of the place, but also by Natalia. Their romance was swift and passionate, culminating in a fairy tale wedding that was the talk of the town for months. Daniel's career continued to thrive, and soon he and Natalia were living in a beautiful home overlooking the ocean. Their life together seemed like a modern-day fairy tale, but beneath the surface of their perfect marriage, cracks began to appear. Natalia, always the devoted daughter and wife, began to feel the need for something more. She had given up her own dreams of traveling and living adventures to settle in Branton Hills, and a part of her resented the sacrifices she had made for her marriage. Daniel, for his part, also struggled with his own demons. The pressure of his high-profile career and the expectations of life in a small town weighed heavily on him. He loved Natalia deeply, but there were moments when he felt suffocated by the perfection that was expected of them. It was in this fragile balance that Emma re-entered their lives. After spending years drifting from city to city, she returned to Branton Hills, claiming to want to reconnect with her roots. In reality, she was fleeing another failed relationship and accumulated debts, seeking refuge in the one place she knew she would be welcomed. Natalia, always the loving sister, welcomed Emma with open arms, offering her a place to stay until she could get back on her feet. However, as Emma settled into the Blunts' home, the dynamic between the three began to change in subtle but profound ways. The stage was set for a drama that would shake Branton Hills to its core, forever altering the lives of everyone involved. At first, Emma's presence seemed to breathe new life into Natalia and Daniel's relationship. Their nights were filled with laughter and memories as the sisters caught up on lost time, with Daniel playing the role of the attentive husband and brother-in-law. But as days turned into weeks, Emma's true intentions began to emerge. Her glances at Daniel lingered just a little too long. Her casual touches became more frequent and deliberate. She found excuses to be alone with him, asking for help with her car, seeking advice on job applications, or simply running into him in the kitchen late at night when Natalia had already gone to bed. At first, Daniel was oblivious to Emma's advances, but slowly, he found himself increasingly drawn to her vibrant personality. Where Natalia was constant and predictable, Emma was spontaneous and exciting. She listened intently to his architectural designs, asking insightful questions that made him feel truly understood. In those moments, Daniel felt a spark he hadn't experienced in years. Daniel was a man of principles, devoted to his wife and the life they had built together. He tried to distance himself from Emma, finding excuses to spend more time at the office or taking on extra projects that kept him away from home. However, Emma was not easily deterred. She recognized the internal struggle in Daniel's eyes and saw it as a challenge rather than a barrier. She began to weave a careful web of seduction, playing on his insecurities and unfulfilled desires. One night, while Natalia was attending a school board meeting, Emma orchestrated a seemingly innocent dinner with Daniel. She prepared his favorite meal, opened a bottle of expensive wine, and created an atmosphere of intimacy that was hard to resist. As they talked late into the evening, Emma skillfully steered the conversation toward Daniel's passions and dreams, areas in which she knew Natalia had never fully connected with him. Daniel felt a flood of emotions, flattery, desire, and overwhelming guilt. He stammered a response, trying to steer the conversation to safer ground, but Emma had already sensed her advantage. She leaned in closer, brushing her hand against his. Have you never wondered what it would be like to be with someone who truly understands you? Someone who sees you as you really are? The tension in the room was palpable. Daniel knew he should leave, end this dangerous game before it went too far, but something kept him rooted in place, trapped by Emma's magnetism. When Emma's lips met his in a passionate kiss, his resistance crumbled. In that moment, the foundation of his marriage began to crack, setting off a series of events that would lead to unimaginable tragedy. The weeks following that fateful night were a whirlwind of stolen moments and growing guilt for Daniel. What had started as a momentary lapse quickly turned into a full-blown affair. Daniel and Emma found increasingly clever ways to be together without raising Natalia's suspicions. Their encounters ranged from quick moments in Daniel's office to carefully planned business trips that allowed them to escape the prying eyes of Brenton Hills. Emma relished the thrilling danger of their forbidden romance, each secret meeting fueling her sense of triumph over her sister. For Daniel, the affair was a heady mix of excitement and self-loathing. Each encounter left him both euphoric and consumed by guilt. Emma, always the master manipulator, knew exactly how to keep Daniel hooked. She alternated between playing the role of passionate lover and vulnerable confidant, expertly tugging at Daniel's emotions to ensure her hold over him remained unshaken. Emma listened to Daniel's frustrations about work and his unfulfilled ambitions, offering him the understanding and validation he so desperately craved. I've never met anyone like you, Daniel, she would whisper during their intimate moments. You deserve so much more than what this small town can offer you. Her words were carefully chosen, planting seeds of discontent in Daniel's mind about his life with Natalia. Emma painted vivid pictures of a future together, full of excitement and passion, free from the limitations of small-town expectations. Daniel found himself increasingly torn between his growing feelings for Emma and his loyalty to Natalia. The double life he was leading began to take its toll, manifesting in mood swings and unusual behaviors that did not go unnoticed by his wife. At home, his guilt expressed itself in a mix of emotional distance and overcompensation. There were days when he could barely look Natalia in the eyes, and others when he showered her with affection, driven by remorse. Daniel buried himself in work, taking on more projects than ever before, using his career both as an escape and an excuse for his ever-increasing absences. For her part, Emma played the role of the devoted sister-in-law to perfection. She engaged in long conversations with Natalia, feigning interest in her day-to-day life, while secretly relishing in her deception. At times, a flicker of guilt crossed Emma's face, a fleeting recognition of the pain she was causing her sister. But those moments were quickly suppressed, eclipsed by her desire for Daniel and her deep-seated need to finally outshine Natalia. As the affair progressed, the risks they took grew greater. They began meeting in more public places, their mutual need outweighing caution. There were moments when they were almost caught. A neighbor who nearly saw them embracing, a colleague of Natalia's who spotted them dining together in a nearby town. Each close call only added intensity to their relationship, the danger becoming part of the thrill. But as the weeks went by, the strain of their deception began to show. Daniel, once revitalized by the affair, now found himself constantly on edge. The guilt consumed him, affecting his work and his relationships with friends and family. He began to wonder if the passion he felt for Emma was worth the destruction of the life he had built with Natalia. Sensing Daniel's inner turmoil, Emma redoubled her efforts to keep him by her side. She became more demanding of his time, more insistent in her declarations of love. Her manipulations became more evident, playing on his guilt and desires in equal measure. As the affair reached its peak, neither Emma nor Daniel realized that their fragile house of cards was about to collapse. The truth, as it often does, was already quietly making its way to the surface, ready to shatter the lives of everyone involved, while Emma and Daniel remained lost in their passionate romance. Natalia was slowly piecing together a puzzle she never wanted to solve. At first, the changes were subtle: an unfamiliar perfume clinging to Daniel's clothes, whispered phone conversations that ended abruptly when she entered the room, and an emotional distance that grew day by day. Always optimistic, Natalia initially attributed these changes to work stress or a midlife crisis. She tried to close the growing gap between them, organizing romantic dinners and weekend getaways, only to be met with lukewarm enthusiasm from Daniel. Ironically, her sister Emma became her confidant during this time, offering a sympathetic ear and words of comfort that only served to drive the knife of betrayal deeper. But as the weeks passed, Natalia could no longer ignore the nagging voice in her mind. She began to pay closer attention to the inconsistencies in Daniel's stories about late nights at work and out-of-town meetings. She noticed how Emma's eyes followed Daniel around the room, the barely disguised hunger in her gaze. One afternoon, while doing the laundry, Natalia found a matchbook from a hotel in a nearby town tucked into the pocket of Daniel's jacket. She knew that hotel wasn't in any of the places he usually frequented for work. The discovery sent a chill down her spine, and the physical evidence made it impossible to deny her worst fears. Torn between confronting her suspicions and the fear of what she might uncover, Natalia found herself in a constant state of anxiety. She began to withdraw from friends and colleagues, unable to bear the thought of sharing her suspicions and making them real. Her sleep was plagued with nightmares, and she found herself watching Daniel and Emma with the vigilance of a hawk, searching for any sign that would confirm or dispel her fears. In a moment of desperation, Natalia even considered hiring a private investigator, but the idea of strangers prying into her private life was too much to bear. Instead, she decided to confront Daniel and Emma separately, hoping that one of them would crack under the pressure and reveal the truth. Little did Natalia know that her decision to seek the truth would set off a chain of events that would lead to a confrontation far more devastating than she could ever have imagined. That fateful day, a stormy autumn afternoon, changed the course of their lives forever. Natalia had spent the morning preparing for the moment she knew was inevitable. She rehearsed what she would say, how she would remain calm and composed in the face of potential devastation. When Daniel walked through the door, shaking the rain from his coat, he was met with the sight of his wife, standing motionless in the room, her face a mask of barely contained emotions. The tension in the air was palpable, and Daniel immediately knew that the facade they had built was about to crumble. "We need to talk," Natalia began, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts. "I know about you and Emma." The color drained from Daniel's face. He opened and closed his mouth, struggling to find the words. In that moment of stunned silence, Natalia saw the truth written clearly in his features, and her last shred of hope evaporated. "How long?" she demanded, her voice rising. "How long have you been sleeping with my sister?" Daniel's shoulders slumped in defeat. He knew there was no point in denying it. "Natalia, I'm so sorry, it just happened." Natalia cut him off with a bitter laugh. "You didn't mean to. What? Did you trip and fall into her bed? How could you do this to me?" The floodgates opened, and months of suspicions and repressed pain poured out. Natalia hurled accusations and questions at Daniel, her voice echoing through the house. Daniel, for his part, could only stand there and absorb her fury, offering weak apologies that did nothing to quell her anger. Just as the argument reached its peak, the front door swung open, and Emma entered, freezing in place as she took in the scene before her. For a moment, the three stood motionless, locked in a tableau of betrayal and guilt. "Emma, how convenient that you're here," Natalia said sarcastically. "We were just talking about your affair with my husband." Emma's eyes darted nervously between Natalia and Daniel, her mind racing to find an escape. Daniel, torn between the two sisters, tried to step in. "Please, let's calm down and talk about this rationally," he urged. His words only redirected Natalia's fury. In a fit of rage, she grabbed a vase from the coffee table and hurled it across the room, barely missing Daniel's head. The vase shattered against the wall, the crash punctuating her words. The sound seemed to snap Emma out of her defiant stance. For the first time, a flicker of remorse crossed her face. She and Daniel exchanged a look of helpless guilt before slowly heading toward the door, knowing there was no going back. As the door closed behind them, Natalia collapsed onto the couch, her body racked with sobs. The life she had known, the future she had planned, had crumbled to dust in a matter of minutes. While the storm raged outside, Natalia's mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, shame, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of loss. At that moment, she made a decision that would set in motion the tragic final act of this disturbing drama. The bartender, a grizzled man named Hank, watched with growing concern as Natalia downed drink after drink. He'd seen his fair share of customers drowning their sorrows, but something about the wild glint in Natalia's eyes set him on edge. "Another," Natalia slurred, her words slightly dragging. Hank hesitated, but the determination in her gaze made him reconsider denying her. He poured her one more. Stumbling toward the door, Natalia managed to make it to the parking lot. She fumbled with her keys, but eventually started the engine, the roar of the car breaking the night's silence. She pulled out of the parking lot, her vision blurred and her reactions dangerously slow. The winding coastal road stretched ahead of her, a ribbon of asphalt barely visible under the moonlight. As she drove, Natalia's mind was a chaotic storm of emotions: anger at Daniel and Emma's betrayal, shame at herself for not seeing it sooner. She lost control, and darkness consumed her as the car plunged off the edge of the cliff, tumbling uncontrollably toward the sharp rocks below. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to break over the horizon when Officer Liam Murphy received the call. A jogger had spotted a wrecked car at the bottom of Whispering Cliffs, a notoriously treacherous stretch of coastline. Murphy, a seasoned member of Brenton Hill's small police force, felt a chill of dread as he made his way to the scene. The sight that awaited him weighed heavily on his heart. As the morning progressed and the magnitude of the tragedy became clear, rumors began to circulate throughout the town. Natalia Sullivan had died in what appeared to be a drunk driving accident. It seemed impossible, completely out of character for the woman everyone knew as responsible and balanced. Detective Sarah Watson called in from the nearest city to lead the investigation. Since there was more to the story, her keen observation picked up on details that didn't quite add up, and the first red flags started to emerge. In the days following Natalia's death, Detective Watson dove into the investigation, peeling back the layers of Brenton Hill's seemingly idyllic surface to reveal the turmoil lurking beneath. Her first step was to reconstruct Natalia's final hours, a task that led her to the Rusty Anchor and its reluctant bartender, Hank. Hank's account of Natalia's state on the night of her death painted a picture of a woman in deep emotional distress. "She was drinking like there was no tomorrow," Hank remarked, with a note of discomfort. Rather than grieving separately, it seemed they were leaning on each other. Their interactions were marked by significant glances and whispered conversations that abruptly stopped when others approached. A major breakthrough came when Watson interviewed Natalia's closest friend, Olivia Chen. Initially, Olivia was hesitant to speak ill of the dead or cause further pain to the family, but as Watson gently pressed, the doors began to open. "Natalia confided in me just a few days before it happened," Olivia revealed, her voice trembling. Detective Watson's relentless investigation caused the carefully constructed alibis to start unraveling. Emma was the first to break. "Yes, we were having an affair," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. Natalia found out that night. The three of us had a huge fight. But I swear, we had no idea. She left the house afterward. Confronted with Emma's confession, Daniel finally admitted to the affair, but denied any involvement in Natalia's death. "We made a terrible mistake," he said, his voice shaking under the weight of the betrayal he and Emma had inflicted. In the end, no criminal charges were filed in relation to Natalia's death. But in the court of public opinion, Daniel and Emma were already condemned. The truth about their affair spread through Brenton Hills like wildfire, forever tarnishing their reputations and ensuring that Natalia's death would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Over time, the raw pain of the events began to fade, but its impact on Brenton Hills remained. Thank you for joining us in this case filled with secrets and tragedy. If you enjoy real crime stories, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any episodes. Until next time.